GM, and welcome everybody back to another Cyphren podcast or another Cyphren interview here. I'm super excited for today's conversation because with us today we have Isaac, who's been working on a tool that I think everyone should go through and everyone should use. The War Room games tool, project, demo, whatever we want to call it. We'll get into it in a second. And we're going to be talking a lot about what to actually do when a hack is in progress. How do you respond? How do you work with it? What's your response time? How do you deal with hacks when they're actually happening? And with us here we have Isaac. Isaac, could you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. So I'm Isaac. I've been a dev in the Ethereum space for many years. Always kind of focused on kind of security and some stuff on DAO tooling and just contributing throughout the space. My main two projects at the moment. I run a company called Shield 3, which does a automated security compliance on the RPC layer, and then I also work with the Security Alliance, which is an initiative kicked off by Sam's son last year, and is just dedicated to providing open source resources to improve the overall security of the space. And we've been running these war game exercises for about a year now as well, and excited to show that off today and show people how they can run them themselves.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for the introduction there. So you're doing security more on the infrastructure level with, what did you say the name of Shield 3?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we kind of are sit as middleware between apps and things like Infura or Alchemy, and enforce policies to protect transactions on that layer. So infrastructure level security kind of in the background is the day job, while we also run the drills for Seal.
Yeah. Great. So how did this actually come to be then? So did you reach out to Sam? Did Sam reach out to you? Were you like, hey, I've been wanting to do this forever? How did you actually start building this project?
Yeah. So it all started, I think, a couple of years ago. Actually, I was at the Decentralized Web Conference in California, where I met Jean, who is a kind of someone that helps coordinate a lot of efforts throughout the space, development, open source tooling, grants, stuff like that. Just got to know her, and then I learned more about the Security Alliance that they were planning to form over the course of the next 6 months or so. Just kind of kept running into them at conferences, chatting about this whole Security Alliance thing. Aligned very much with my interests. I gave a talk at DevCon in Bogota about basically how to social engineering a Gnosis safe through various module extensions. And I think that caught her attention, and thought that was cool. And then as her and Sam were working on kicking off the Security Alliance, they were talking about the various projects that they wanted to do. And War Games, I think, was actually one of the first. They've since launched the 911 bot and the Safe Harbor Constitution, which we can talk about. But War Games was one of the first thing that Sam wanted to do, I think, because he's been in so many war rooms and just seen the chaos of what it's like for people to be in a war room for the first time when there's a real live incident happening, and the chaos that ensues from that, and all the things that could be improved. And so the goal was just help people practice. And so that was very interesting to me. And synced up with them and started planning like what the first drills might look like.
So I guess two questions here. So number one, for the people who don't know, what is a war room?
So a war room happens when a protocol discovers some sort of incident. So think about all the times when you've seen like a bridge hack. We can think about the Nomad bridge hack from a couple of years ago, when there was some sort of smart contract upgrade that made it so that funds could start be drained from the bridge. And that led to this big public incident where funds were being lost. People that wanted to protect the protocol, or like white hat hackers, were trying to save funds. And at the same time, the protocol pulled in all sorts of security experts, like Sam included, and a bunch of others, to try to figure out how do we stop the bleeding? How do we do an emergency patch? And how do we communicate to the public what's happening? And all of those decisions happen typically in a big chaotic Meet or Zoom call, where people are trying to figure out what happened, how do we respond, how bad's the damage, and what do we say?
Yeah, fantastic. So Sam was basically like, hey, we need to practice these war rooms. You were like, wow, that sounds great. Let's do this. And then boom, you just started cracking away at building this scenario? Like you were like, all right, I got it. Like, no problem,
Yeah.
Sam.
So well, part of the first thing was like, yeah, just had a quick intro call with Sam, talked about like what I am able to do, and was like, hey, let's give this a shot. It's always been very like kind of scrappy from the beginning, where it's like, didn't have a whole lot of tooling built, didn't know what the scenarios looked like, but we knew the goal that we wanted, which was like training protocols. And so the idea was like, let's pick a protocol that might be our first guinea pig. And we were super grateful to have the Compound Labs team was willing to be the first in this scenario. And so, so a bunch of devs from the Compound ecosystem and the Open Zeppelin team, they were our first targets. And we organized the first, what we call a tabletop scenario. That's the first case where I basically spend a few weeks reading everything I can about the protocol, understanding how it works, finding the things to poke at, and then talk through some scenarios. And then after that, design some sort of like live scenario where they have to respond to on a test net. And I just want the distinction between when we plan these is like, we're not auditors. And so like, we're not like going through their contracts, looking for vulnerabilities or 0 days and stuff. We're looking for like things that could legitimately happen, that should be in like an incident response playbook that they need to practice handling.
Got it. So I have a lot of my thoughts on the answer to this question. Why is this important to practice?
Well, if you imagine like you get a page in the middle of the night, maybe you have like pager duty set up, and you see you're the security dev that's in charge of making sure that like some sort of bridge is not getting attacked. You have some monitoring set up. Maybe you have like a multi-sig of trusted people in the ecosystem that you can call for help to like pause a protocol. All of that stuff, while you can lay it out in a procedure, you can write tests, you can like write out a procedure, but until you actually have to do it in the moment, you don't. You might scramble, right? Like you might be thinking like, okay, where do I actually have the ledger that has the key for this multi-sig? Who else is on it? Do they have their ledgers? Are they camping? Do they not have access to their ledgers? Like how fast can you actually respond and do this stuff, and make sure that you're not like making mistakes along the way, and also not losing the public's trust, because like you want to make sure that you're communicating like what's happening. If you disclose too early, what does that mean that people are going to come in and actually attack you more? So like all of those decisions, you need to just build reflexes for how to do that, so that the first time that you're actually trying to do this isn't when you're at risk of losing like hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, during some of the hacks that have happened over the past few years, I've seen a lot of teams kind of have that mentality where they go, well, before the hack, actually, they had the mentality, hey, code's been audited, it's immutable, haha, don't even care about it anymore, like, see ya. And then an exploit happens, they all panic, they get on a call, and I've seen brilliant people have their brains fall out of their skulls and just make completely insanely stupid decisions. And I feel like a big part of it is because they're not used to the pressure. Like having that pressure of like, holy shit, every single second, millions of dollars is being stolen from our smart contract. That pressure affects your decision making, and you can be a lot stupider. You can make some I've seen some really intelligent people make some really poor decisions. And you talk to them and you say, yeah, get any other given day, you ask me what to do in that situation, I would never recommend doing what I did. But just because I was panicking, I freaked out, I fat fingered something, and I said, yeah, let's just do that. And then I didn't think it through and just made something really stupid. So yeah, definitely practicing this stuff, super important. Knowing what to do in case of in case of an incident, in case you're in the middle of a hack. Most protocols today aren't doing this. They don't have this practice, which is kind of terrifying, right? There's some teams that I've worked with that have like crazy extensive incident response teams, which is phenomenal. But I feel like most teams don't have this. Why don't most teams go through this practice? Why don't most teams have an incident response team?
Yeah, I think that a lot of protocol teams tend to be structured very like differently. Like if you look at some protocols which have kind of more of like an in-house dev team of people that and they operate a bit more like a company and maybe have some more formal procedures, they might be more prepared for this. But then if you look at the more I guess like anon developer, like decentralized protocols where you don't know where people are spread around the world. Like they can also have like some mature processes, but I think it's just like the maturity of the industry is getting to a point where this is needed, and perhaps like people just didn't think that it was necessary beforehand. But I think it's becoming clear, like with all the hacks and the pressure that people have been under, that this is like something that they need to practice. So, but yeah, the level of maturity just like varies so widely, and it's very easy for a protocol to go from like launch something and then suddenly have tens of millions in assets that you're doing, but not actually be equipped with either with the expertise or experience to protect that.
Yep, makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for all the answers there. I'm really excited because before we started filming here, we said we would go through and do a little demo here. So everybody watching live, feel free to ask questions as we're going through this. I will go ahead and share Isaac's screen now, where we're going to actually go through this drill scenario. We're going to basically, Isaac, take the wheel. What's the setup? What's this look like? We're gonna go through one of these war games, and correct me if I'm wrong. This is the same, basically going to be the same kind of code-based project that the base blockchain, the base L2 just went through the other day. They went through this war game. They practiced some of this incident response here. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. So I have some infrastructure running that is kind of mimics what we were doing with on the exercise that Base just shared a blog post.
Could you zoom in just a hair, just so we can kind of show off the repo here? So this is the repo.
This is our like template repo. And just to take a step back for a second, one other thing that's very interesting about these scenarios is like we were talking about how like protocols will have their code bases audited. They think that they're safe, but a big blind spot tends to be like, what are their external dependencies? So like, are you if like what happens to your protocol if you integrate a token that behaves slightly different than standard, or what happens if like an Oracle system that you're relying on is not functioning? So you have to think more than just like, what are the possible things that can happen to this team's like audited smart contracts, and also what are all the things that can happen based on the things that they've integrated. So I'll show just like a couple, like just like a 1 or 2 slides about like that just describe the process, and then that'll make, I think, the repo make a bit more sense. And so what we're doing is preparing teams to respond in these high pressure scenarios. And so the first thing we have to do is like read a bunch of docs. The second thing we do is like go through a tabletop exercise with them, with the whole team. And so it's not just we don't just work with like the protocol devs. They're of course a core part of this, but often like they have their auditing firm on call to help them with incidents, so they're involved. If they have like a team of like trusted guardians, they have to be involved. If they have someone that's managing their Twitter and comms, like they should also be involved, and legal if they have any if they have like a legal team that needs to make sure that what they're doing is okay, they should also be involved. So this is like beyond just like helping the devs practice. This is like helping the whole team respond to what's going to happen.
So when you walk a team, I'm going to keep using Base as an example, right? Just because I would want everyone to kind of do this with the same level of seriousness that Base does. When you did this with Base, and then obviously if you can't tell us some information, that's fine. Was it the same? You had like their marketing team, their auditors, their core devs, like everybody on this call to kind of practice this?
Yeah, exactly. So like there were parts of the exercise when it's like, okay, they I think are a really great example of like really strong incident response playbooks. And it's like, okay, what are we communicating out to the public? Do we have like a template for what we say if we have to, if this thing has to happen? If not, like we need to, that's like a whole, okay, we need to be able to know like what the comms people can be tweeting out or issuing press releases like at certain points in an incident. So yeah, it's everybody from like leadership to devs to security to comms. It's everyone.
Crazy, awesome, cool.
So if we look at this drill template, this is like a collection of resources. This is public. Anyone can go to this like Security Alliance repo drill template. This is a work in progress.
You want to drop me that yes. Link in the chat?
Yeah,
perfect. Thanks.
So this is a public resource that we're whenever we do a drill, I try to take like whatever new tooling we had to build and add that here as a template. And so this has a bunch of things on the technical side, but I've also included some like scripts here. And so I think like since part of the drill is like the tabletop exercise where we're just like talking through, you could think almost like a dungeon master style, like putting the teams through an exercise, like what would you do if this happened? I have like a script in here, a like template script here, and we can just kind of talk about like what context are we giving these teams when they come in. And so what we say is like, this first exercise, we're discussing scenarios that in which you'd have to like detect something, diagnose it, and respond. You should have the whole team involved and discuss like whether like what would you actually do in this scenario.
So before, just so I'm clear here. So before, like, I guess the game begins, right? And the game being like you have infrastructure running, you're going to put them through a live scenario. You almost like just have like, I don't know, what is this? A day, an hour, several hours where you just go, what do you do if? What do you do
like
if?
an hour and a half, because like what that helps us understand is like what is their level of monitoring that they have in place? What's their level of like maturity regarding like their like an incident response playbook? What is what is kind of the control surface they have over the protocol? Like, is everything completely immutable? Do they have the ability to pause something? Do they have ability to like isolate risk in certain ways, or like is it like if I pause this thing, I pause the whole thing? So we want to understand like what they have the ability to do. What usually comes up in these is also like we'll ask them for stories about previous incidents that they've had, where they can say like, we discovered this thing happened, it took us this long to respond. This is the monitoring system that alerted it. And that just helps us understand like what we have to replicate to make the live scenario feel most realistic.
Right.
And so we want to know like, are they using like Forta or like Defender to monitor stuff? Have they built like custom monitoring? Are they using like some sort of other hosted platform? Right. Do they use like Tenderly as part of their diagnosis process? Because like that all helps us understand how do we make this like realistic.
Right. So this kind of phase, this is phase one, you said, right? Or no? Okay. So this
I guess this is phase two. Phase one is like all of our research, and then this is like the first exercise.
Got it. Okay. So phase two is So phase one is let's gather information about this protocol, and we're kind of approaching this from your perspective, who's going to be running the drill, right? So can this phase two, can a team walk through this themselves to kind of better prepare, or is this something where hey, like they should reach out to you or some other, I guess, drill instructor, if you will? Is a team walking through this section themselves going to be helpful to them?
I think it could certainly be helpful if they're like if they have a day to like where they dedicate to thinking about what could go wrong, and because it's so easy when you're building stuff to just be very like heads down and think like, okay, I'll figure this thing out later. But like when it comes to, so I think it would be useful for somebody inside to run these regularly. And in fact, one thing we're trying to do is like when we finish an engagement, we want to like leave the protocol with tools to do this in the future. We're working on some of the first stuff of those first like kind of code packages we can share with teams so that they can run these as like periodic, maybe like 6-month trainings. But I think it's also helpful to have an outside perspective, like someone that is like thinking about aspects of the protocol that they're not as worried about. Maybe like they're really focused on like the new V3, V4 of their protocol, but there's still a bunch of like liquidity in like the V1 that they deployed 4 years ago. And maybe like that's like a thing that they're not thinking about, but could still cause issues.
Right. So for now, as where the kind of this template currently is, it sounds like it's pretty difficult for a team to kind of just come and self do it. And it sounds like at some point it'll hopefully be easy enough, either with people contributing or us running enough of these. And the reason I kind of bring that up is so I think back to my TradFi's days. I worked at an asset manager, and we would have like a DR day, right? Most companies have kind of a classic DR day, stands for disaster recovery. What we're doing here is basically, the Web3 version of that, except for we're calling it a war room. It's probably a little bit more dire than just like, oh, our server went down and we can't look at cat photos or something. But basically what we would do is we would just say, okay, at 9 o'clock today, we're going to shut off the database or the server or something like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
and basically panic the rest of the day. Haha, no, not really. We would follow our disaster recovery plan to get back up and get back live, but depending on how we ran it, we could make it easier or harder, right? If
Mm-hmm.
we just said, "Oh, we were expecting it was going to come," we already knew what the attack scenario was, and we just hit enter, and then we ran the script to like put it back to normal. Okay, well, it's successful DR day, I guess, but you didn't really learn anything. You didn't really grow. Here, it's really sounding like you're doing a lot of due diligence to actually set up a really interesting scenario to throw at them with their code base, so that you can actually test realistically. Would it make sense to have projects go through a kind of a generalist DR day, maybe with like some code base we were all familiar with, or are we thinking no, we really should kind of customize them per protocol?
I think that like industry-wide ones, like I think we've discussed that would potentially be interesting. Like, is there perhaps like some sort of core thing that could go wrong that could affect a bunch of protocols at the same time? And then like that would be like quite interesting to see like how teams coordinate it across them. So like you could think of like very general scenarios, like what if something like really bad actually happened more on the consensus layer of Ethereum, and like there's some, I don't know, massive like multi-thousand block reorg that happens, and teams have, and everyone's databases are out of sync. Everyone and there, I think there would be some things that we could think about that would affect the whole ecosystem that teams could use. I think as like what would we do if this thing happened?
Oh, that's really interesting. Cool. All right, sorry to interrupt your flow. So we're on phase 2. We're going through. We're talking to the team.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what are you guys thinking about? What are you not thinking about? And this is going to help you come up with a scenario to throw at them.
Yeah, that's right. We want to know like so like the questions that we ask, like we'll come up with a scenario, and then we ask like these various questions. We'll say like what this thing happened, like let's say that it's like a bunch of money got drained from your bridge. Like how did you actually find out that this happened? Like was it did you have monitoring in place that's looking for this, or did you somebody like reached out, like somebody disclosed a bug via like a bug bounty platform, somebody posted on Twitter and you saw like, oh no, like something bad's happening. Like how did you actually discover that this specific like thing happened? And then what do you like, who's the team that's gathering this? Like does the person that detected it, who would have been the first to detect it, and then do they know who to ask for help? Like do they have the contact info for all of these various people, and how did they assemble them into a war room? One thing that we haven't done yet, but I think might be kind of interesting, is like this is happening and also Telegram's down at the same time, and so you can't actually use Telegram to like reach out to all these teams. Like how would you find them?
Well, that's an interesting scenario right there.
Yeah.
just everyone panics, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, do you have their phone numbers? Do you have their emails?
Just kidding. Don't panic. Yeah.
Like how do you actually reach out to these people? Like, do you have multiple ways of getting to them? And then like, what is your response plan? Like, do you have a playbook for this incident? And like, what are the actions that you start taking? Like, are you communicating to the public? Are you just like trying to do like a quick like private fix and then communicating later? I think a really good team and resources to look at for this is like the Yearn ecosystem. And so like Yearn is like their core set of smart contracts, but then of course like every strategy that Yearn deploys interacts with like many different protocols outside of their control. And so they have like a really interesting like risk diligence process that happens before a new strategy gets deployed, which includes like, these are the things that could go wrong. Like these are the people that know what to do. And like, these are the steps that you would take to like pull funds back in case like this external thing fails. And so like that's a really interesting case where, you're a protocol that has your smart contracts have all sorts of like connections to other things. Like think about what could go wrong over there in your dependencies and how you would like respond to that. And just maintain a library of that, because that way, when the thing actually does go wrong, you're not like, trying to pull up your, code repo and docs from years ago. You just have it all right there, like in a place ready to go.
For most of the teams that you've been working with, like Base, Compound, etc., who is in charge of kind of all of this? Is it like whoever is the head of security, and then there's a team specifically dedicated to incident response? Is it some type of hybrid where the core devs are kind of in charge of the DR plan or the war room game plan? Is there basically who is the person who makes sure, because in my mind I'm like, okay, there are a lot of moving pieces here. Who's in charge of making sure everything is getting looked at? Who are the first responders? Who are the head of this initiative at these orgs?
Yeah, so it tends to be like spread across different teams. So like there will be if they have some sort of like risk committee like Urine has, like there's people that are in charge of that, in charge of like maintaining those docs and making sure that those things are up to date. When an actual incident happens, their teams tend to elect like an incident commander, where like that's the person that is because what you don't want in these incidents is like people to not actually be all like working together and in concert to solve something. And so it seems important that a lot of teams will like, okay, doesn't matter. Well, it matters who it is, but it could be any number of people that are qualified to be like the incident response lead, who's like maintaining the documentation of like what they're doing along the way, like coordinating all the different teams like responses together. And so there'll be like someone that's kind of elected, or someone will take charge and take up that role, so that people like have a single source of truth as far as like what are we doing and in what order. So it's like a combination of the core devs, like security. If they have like in-house security, it's in-house security, or it can be like their auditors who they've like contracted for like long-term incident response support, who are on call to help them.
Great, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so are we done with the tabletop script? Is there more to the tabletop?
Just about, yeah. So like, what did they do to implement the incident response plan? Right. What action did they take? And then also like reflection, like what could have gone better? And so this is a couple of weeks of work for us, but then it ends up being like an hour of work with the team. But what this kicks off is like, what do we actually design for the real live scenario? And I think that I can show some of the bots that I have running, but it might also be interesting to create a foundation and like imagine like if we like were to pick maybe a protocol we haven't done before, and think about like how we would approach that.
Yeah, let's do it. So it sounds like just so that we have the phases right though, right? So phase one was open source, and again, the phases are from your end. Open source kind of gathering information. Phase two is this tabletop script where we're saying, hey, what would you do here? What's your incident response? Blah, blah. Gives you information so that we can go to number three, where you actually take all that information, you build some type of hypothetical scenario using, and this is where it gets a little bit shady for me, and this is what I'm kind of excited to see. What if we chose something real minimal? So in Cypher and Updraft, it's our education platform. We do a lot. One of the flagship projects, I guess, is we do a stablecoin project. Could we? Is it possible for us to walk through as if this is kind of like a mock, a much more simplified DAI? Is that something that we could do? Or
yeah, so like this. So this is like a rather than like an asset backed, this is like a collateralized stablecoin that has some sort of like contracts under the hood.
Yeah. And then if you were thinking of a different one, we can go with a different one.
No, we can do that. That sounds fun.
Cool.
So if we think about like a simplified DAI, like what might be a scenario?
Yeah. So kind of one of the final projects in like the advanced Foundry section of the curriculum is real minimal stablecoin, ETH as collateral. That's it. So it's a collateralized stablecoin. It's using a chain like Oracle as a price feed. And the way it works is it has a 200% collateralization ratio. So you need to, in order to mint $200, you need to put in $400 worth of ETH. It has a liquidate function where liquidators are given like an extra 5% reward for liquidating people. Kind of like really minimized DAI.
Yeah. So let's see. I think what we could. So a couple things that we could talk about there is like things that could affect users would be, something has gone wrong that's making it such that like liquidations are happening when they shouldn't, or perhaps like liquidations aren't happening when they should, and just causing maybe like like there's more tokens that are like minted than there should be, because maybe like there's a problem with a price feed, or like some sort of like weird smart contract bug that's making it so that like there's too many like tokens that are able to be minted. And so I guess what we might do in like a live scenario for that is like take those like smart contracts, introduce that bug, and then come up with like bots to exploit it, but also like make it feel realistic. So the first thing that we want to do there is like actually set up a bunch of wonder if I have a slide for this. Yeah, so I have like this like graphic here where it's like, this is what we're trying to build, like in the scenario where we have like a DAI style platform where we have a network fork where there should be like normal behavior happening on the network. And so the first thing, even while we're just trying to like figure out what the exact like exploit is, we want to make the scenario realistic. And so what we do is we write a bunch of bots that just like pretend to be like normal behavior on the network. So in this case,
this just jump in. So this network fork, is this is where to me it gets more interesting. So is this like what you have, like a server that you set up, like a network fork with like an RPC for them to call? Do you have like fake, or I guess you could use like a Block Scout or like open source explorers or something? Like what the setup going into this, is it really going to be like, okay, so let's say we just introduced a bug into the smart contract, right? It's simple as that. We fork the chain on an RPC you're controlling, and then we say, all right, guys, here's the RPC, here's the smart contract, etc. Like, I guess the setup would need to really even integrate with their monitoring tools. Like,
that's right. And so
a lot of uncertainty here for me at the moment.
Yeah, so there's quite a lot that goes in, and it depends on like what the team's actual like infrastructure looks like. And so for the base one, we actually hosted a chain on using Conduit. And so we created a new roll up that was to like mimic a like some sort of chain in the superchain ecosystem that they could like monitor and look for something to go wrong. And so Conduit made it really easy in this case, since we were like simulating the behavior of like an optimism style rollup. And what that got us was a Block Scout Explorer, a public RPC, even like a UI for bridging. And so the infra on that side was actually a bit easier on this one. In the past, we've used two other tools. One thing that we've done is used a combination of Anvil and Block Scout. And so I think in here I have, let's see. I think that I might have some scripts in here, or I might need to add like some Docker files in here, but we have some Docker files, some Docker Compose scripts that make it so that you can spin up an Anvil fork of a network and a Block Scout Explorer at the same time. And so that way the team has access to an Explorer with like verified contracts, and they can use like Block Scout to like explore what's going on. And then if like they're monitoring, which we can talk about the different monitoring setups in a second, if they're monitoring like figures out that something's gone wrong, they can actually come in and like see the transaction and debug it. And so like this is like either like Anvil and Block Scout, or Conduit and Block Scout we use in this case. But we also will use like Tenderly testnets. So Tenderly launched like these virtual test nests, I think last month. They were in beta for a while, and they were like gave us access to use these. And so the nice thing about running our forknet on Tenderly is that the team gets a kind of like a minimal block explorer where they can come in and see transactions. But what they can also do is have access to like the full like Tenderly debugging environment. Because we found that a lot of teams, when they're trying to like diagnose an incident and figure out what went wrong, they'll like be coming in and like look at a transaction. Oop, nice invalid opcode thing. A nice access to the Tenderly system, so that they can see what happened, and they can like debug the transaction. Also, the nice thing about here is like there's a faucet. So if I have a bunch of bots running that I need to fund and keep funded to like if we're talking about like the DAI case, like maybe taking out new, depositing new like ETH into the protocol, minting new DAI, and then maybe like transferring the DAI around and then like paying back their loan or like doing a liquidation, we can use like a faucet here to like fund all of those bots to do those transactions.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of options to pick kind of where to host the chain and the contracts, if you will. Okay. Yeah, I'm very familiar with Tenderly and Conduit. So both of those seem like they would make a lot of sense. So, okay. So we fork the chain in one of these tools. We add our bugs, we add whatever. And then what is like, all right, here's your RPC. Like, we're going to attack you in the next 24 hours.
Yeah. So we want to set up like their monitoring. So in Compound's case, we like basically adapted a bunch of their forwarded bots from their GitHub to run against our RPC and feed alerts into a Telegram channel. And then they had access in Telegram to like, okay, what's happening? Okay, this alert flashed, this alert happened. Here's the transaction where it happened. Go ahead and debug. On the we used a similar setup with Aave where we like fed alerts into like a Telegram channel as well. And then for Urine, they had a bunch of like custom monitoring that we like also forked. So there's been quite a lot of custom development per protocol, like depending on what they're using. And then Optimism and Base, like Base is using some tools from Hexagate. And then Optimism also has a bunch of like monitoring bots in their public GitHub that you can use to like see what they're looking for. And so if they're like looking for a certain invariance on the protocol, they have these different like kind of TypeScript alert monitoring bots that are running and feeding data into a Grafana and Prometheus instance. And so like we also have a template here in the repo where I'll probably end up using this for future drills. Just it actually worked really well this time. It was just really clean to set up, where we can just like write like alerting bots in TypeScript that are like looking for events that happen that indicate something's gone wrong, and then it feeds an alert into like Grafana. We can like see stats here. And then we can set up alerts to go to, in this case, like if a protocol is using something like OpsGenie, we actually like set up an OpsGenie account, and like we can see like alerts coming in here, and this might be hooked into their pager system. And so like that's the main part of the work, is just like getting it as realistic as possible, so that they have to do like as little like LARPing as possible, and as more like, okay, we can assume that this is all real.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we add the RPC. We fork the chain. We give them the RPC. We hook up all their stuff. We hook up their monitoring. We hook up the UI. We hook up the Telegram.
Yeah, and then we say, like you said, like we'll say like, okay, at some point in this like 8-hour window, we will do something that you'll have to respond to.
So there's a lot of manual setup to this, and I kind of understand, like, yeah, like you kind of have to. This also shows why it's so important to build your systems to be modular, so that it is easy to just come in and swap out the RPC for kind of this forked version, and your test suite should work the same on this as it does on the actual the true network. So okay, so yeah, so then we say, hey, I'm going to run some scripts, and this is where you put the hood up, you hunch over on the laptop, and you go, and you send the scripts, you send whatever attack that you have planned.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll tend to write those using like a Foundry script, and so I don't think I have one in the public repo here, but like basically we'll write like a forge a script using Foundry, which will actually like execute the exploit.
Can I ask, what's everything in here? Is this like scripts that you've already written? Is this?
Yeah, this is like just a bunch of like helper tools that I've accumulated over the course of the exercises.
I see.
And so in the bots folder, I have like a Docker compose file. I have like some services in here where if we look at the like bot, like this is a like template bot, which like you can give it a faucet, like a private key for a faucet.
Nice.
You can give it a mnemonic for a bunch of bots. and then it'll just kind of like loop through however often you want, and like take certain actions. So in this case, what this bot is doing is just like getting funds from the faucet, minting some ERC20s, and then like transferring them around to other bots. So it's like a really basic like template bot. But this is like great. This is like a great starting point, so that like if you go down here to this like main loop, you can say like, okay, for each bot, I want to like track some stats, and then I want to like run some ERC20 transfers. But this is where you could like insert any other bot behavior. And so if we were doing the die case, this is where I would pull in the ABIs of these contracts, and then have the bots like depositing, minting die, paying back loans, doing all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. So it almost sounds like, is that the end then? So basically we give them the RPC, we run the exploit, and then we see how they do. And is that kind of the...
Yeah, and that's like that's like where our kind of work ends and their work begins. And so we ask that they add us to any war room so that we can like take notes and keep track of what happened. What we found actually in a couple cases, like they're taking it so seriously that like messaging us is not part of their runbook. And so often it'll be like half an hour to 45 minutes after we run the thing, and we're like, oh, is it working? Did they actually detect the thing? Are they responding? And then we have to like send kind of like some sort of message. This happened in the last couple ones that we did, where it was like, so did you guys notice anything went wrong? And they were like, oh yeah, we've been in a war room for half an hour. We're like, sorry, we forgot to invite you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we're observers, and then we're just like watching what they're doing, keeping an eye on stuff. Like some cases maybe like asking some like leading questions, but we try to just like sit back and observe, and see what they do, and discover like if there's some weird things happening, like oh wow, this like script that I thought would like work to like emergency upgrade our contracts, we didn't keep it maintained, and therefore like it's not actually running. Like that's just an example of something that they might discover has gone wrong. And like those are really good learnings for them to find out in a practice case, versus if they were like under pressure then having to like write a bunch of code on like the day of a real incident. And so they'll like actually pull up all their tools and say, okay, this happened. Should we like pause the protocol? Can we pause the protocol? Do we need to like try to like front run this exploit and like drain our smart contracts before an attacker drains our smart contracts? Like they have to make those decisions. And then they have to see, like, is their tooling sophisticated enough that they can actually run that under pressure, or are they having to like go in and like pull up a bunch of old code they haven't looked at in like a year or two?
That's like some of the stuff where I'm like, would look back at what you've written. Like, how would do you have bots that like basically like control the mempool? Because a part of me is thinking like, okay, like if so one of the issues that I've seen come up all the time in like these live scenarios is somebody will go, oh my God, there's an active exploit happening. Oh my God, there's a bug here. I need to exploit it beforehand. And then they shoot a transaction to the public mempool, gets destroyed because obviously it's in the public mempool. They get front run, boom. We've seen that. I feel like 50% of the active hacks. Is that something that you have some scripting to do that? Can you like control the mempool and just like how does your do you have tooling for that?
We have not yet, but I think that we're going to need to for some of the future ones, because like so far, like the response from the teams, like we haven't done a scenario where they actually have to like front run and drain white hat drain a contract before an attacker does, but we're actually thinking about doing that for some of the future ones. And so in that case, I don't have like exactly what that infrastructure would look like yet. We could kind of mock it where it's like, if for example we're running something on Tenderly, we could like kind of go in and like actually like submit the transaction from the dashboard, or like do something to say, okay, you decided to submit this to a private mempool that is not going to get front run. We're just going to take that for granted that happened, and then like simulate that it happened and then simulate that it worked. But it would be, I think it would be really fun if we also had like kind of MEV bots running on these fork nets that could like try to front run. So I haven't done that yet, but that'd be really cool.
That's where like a little bit of like the realness kind of would be lost for me. Like, because
Mhm.
I have like, I have some wallets with keys, right? That I'm like, okay, if I touch them, if I do use them for anything, I kind of like I'm already like panicking just because I'm
Yeah.
like, all right, like don't fuck up this transaction. And if I'm not touching those wallets, maybe I'm a little bit more. And the same thing with transactions. I'm like, okay, I need to send this to a private RPC. Maybe I'm going to send this to Flashbots or something.
Mhm.
And I almost feel like my instincts would just naturally like drop and replace my RPC with Flashbots, only for me to be like,
Mhm.
wait, no, that's I'm not using the real Flashbots. I need to use this fake Flashbots. Do you see that
Yeah.
kind of affecting the performance in some of these?
I think that's something that could definitely be improved. Like we want like that pressure to exist for them to make that decision. And then
Mm,
yeah, like at the moment, if like we have to kind of like LARP that aspect of like, okay, this is what you would do, and okay, hope that you didn't mess up.
right.
But yeah, that could definitely be make it feel more realistic. The fact that we actually ran this last one that we did was the first one that we actually ran on like live Sepolia. Normally we have everything
Wow.
running. Normally we have like everything running on a private test net. And so
Mhm.
like if we start to do these more and more like out in the open, like on live networks, then we might just kind of get the benefit
Right.
of the more realism. And
Right.
also one thing we've talked about is like, could we pull the public like a bunch of like devs in for like kind of a mass war game where there's like attackers,
Yeah.
defenders, and then like okay,
That'd be
everybody,
cool.
like we communicate that this is happening, and like half of you are trying to like make the incident worse, and half of you are like trying to like white hat help the protocol. That would be like add to the realism.
Oh, that's really interesting. So how did some of these teams do, I guess? Like, is there a benchmark that you're like, I mean, because now you've done a couple of these, right, with
Hmm.
some of the biggest protocols in the space, right? Is there a benchmark where you're like, okay, like if you don't respond in a certain amount of time, if you don't triage the issue in a certain amount of time, if you don't,
Hmm.
are there benchmarks that you're looking for that if it's below some benchmark, you're like, like unacceptable?
I think that we haven't like graded or like have a rubric for the protocols yet. It's like the benefit of a lot of the exercises is like if the team goes through it and like we can instill that pressure that they feel and like maybe a couple things go wrong but they figure out how to recover. Like that's part of the practice that's actually good. So like we want to set up the teams up for success, but we don't want to make it too easy, but we also don't want to like make it so that we just like instantly wreck their protocol and then they just feel defeated. And so as far as like how the teams do, like we tend to craft them in a way where we're like pretty confident they're going to be able to respond, like it's in their scope of things that they should be able to control. And they have all done quite well. Like 10 like between discovering the incident and like if they have to issue a pause or they have to like upgrade a contract or they have to like do something like that, like teams I've rarely seen it take more than like 20 minutes to an hour for them to like fully understand the scenario and like do the like take care of everything. So yeah, teams have done quite well, but that might also be because like we're trying to like do something that is like realistic and that we want them to respond to, but maybe like we throw in some additional like wild cards where like we start with one exploit but then we like introduce a worse exploit and then they have to like triage and see which one's worse that they have to deal with first. So kind of in development there, to see what teams would do if we start like really throwing even more
Mm,
chaos at them.
interesting. Very, very interesting. So if I'm a protocol and I want to go through this, what is my process? How do I get in contact with you? How do I set this up?
So we have like a type form on the Security Alliance website under Seal War Games, and so I'll grab the link for this and drop it here. So we have like a long like backlog of protocols that we are set up to work with, but we're also trying to figure out how we can do more of these in parallel. Like right now, we're trying to get to a cadence of like one, maybe two a month. That's like what we can support. But if more and more people are like trained up on doing this or like doing this for their teams or maybe auditing firms even like start doing this as part of their services for protocols. That would be really cool. But what we need there is just like, more maturity and the readiness of like making this like easy to come in and figure out how to set up a scenario. So if people want to try doing this, like there's nothing stopping someone from today, like saying, hey, I'm going to try to run my own like mini war game. If they do that, please like reach out to me and tell me how it went. Tell me like what additional help you need. But if they also just kind of want to help build out the tooling to make it easier, we're love to kind of have people either shadowing or taking the lead on additional protocols. And then we can like do more and more of these.
So it almost sounds like we need some training on two things. So first off, we need some training on setting one of these up so that people can just come to the drill template repo, fork it, set it up for whatever. And then obviously we need more training on actually doing the incident response.
And then sharing out the best practices, I think, because like if we do this for one protocol and this one protocol learns like, okay, these are the things we didn't have in place that we should have in place, then even not doing the war game for other protocols, they could like adapt those things into their process, have a playbook, have like reusable templates for incident response, at least just the basics as far as like elect an incident response leader, have multiple ways of communicating with your multi-sig guardians, like stuff like that could just be integrated into team's best practices, even if they haven't like gone through a drill.
Right. I'm almost thinking of, okay, what does the future of doing these drills look like? And yeah, it feels like it almost feels like pretty much always there's going to have to, or at least for the new future until AI becomes amazing, there's always going to have to almost be like, use the term like dungeon master. Yeah. It's going to have to be some type of dungeon master and who sets up the game, and then everyone kind of goes in. But yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. There probably could and should be some war games off of like a very well-known protocol where you can almost just like hit a button, go, and it just sets everything up. And then people can practice at least, like a single scenario. I think that would be really
that'd be really fun. I would love like maybe we do at like maybe we do it at like this DevCon, like where we do all of these remotely. But like, what if we could get a few protocol teams in a room? Everyone spends a day like setting up their monitoring infrastructure on some sort of fork that we all agree to, and then we have like an attack team that's like that kicks something off, and then like we've got multiple protocols working at the same time. Like everyone's kind of in a in like kind of a hackathon style hall at DevCon, like all like doing this together.
Almost like that would be really cool. Like almost like an incident response competition.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be really cool. Cool. So looking at this repo here, so like you have Ape, you have bots, monitoring services. So like if somebody wanted to come in and try to set up, like you said, you're working on the docs, you're working on kind of making this a little
easier. There's some decent docs in here as well, like as far as like what you should be considering. But then like there is still some like knowledge that needs to be transferred around like how exactly we recommend doing it. But honestly, like I kind of figure it out as I'm going along, and so I feel like anyone else that is like motivated to do it would also be able to piece together the tools to make one run.
Yeah, like DEF CON CTF style.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So I'm like, I kind of want to just like grab this repo and start tinkering with it. This is so fun. This is so cool. I want everyone to be good at this.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I feel like I have like, I could ask a bunch more questions, but every ounce of me is just like, give me the repo. Let's play.
Yeah.
So I guess, is there anything else? I did have a more point question. So, does this cost protocols anything? Because I can imagine, if you guys have a huge backlog, a lot of like in my mind, like a lot of protocols would definitely benefit. Well, not even in my mind, probably in all of our minds, most protocols would definitely benefit from something like this. And is there a way for them to get to the front of the line? Is this paid? Is this free?
So it's free for the protocols. We like the Security Alliance received a bunch of grants from a bunch of like great
Nice.
organizations here. And
Love
so
it.
far we've been like funding all this stuff based on grants, and then we're kind of like prioritizing protocols based on like one like impact to the ecosystem. And so we try to like pick things that are under like heavily utilized, have a lot of funds at risk, and then also protocols that are just like we can imagine like good scenarios for. And so if somebody wanted to kind of get to the front of the line, get some help, one thing is like if you can dedicate some internal resources from the team to help. We like to have what we call kind of like a mole on the team that's like setting stuff up. And so if the team can like have one of their devs or audit partners like work with us, that helps it go faster. And yeah, so if they reach out and say, hey, we can dedicate these people, we can this is like some stuff we have in mind, that makes it a lot easier for us to plan. There's one additional phase that I didn't talk about, which is like kind of these take-home exercises. And so one thing that we did for a couple of protocols is like, okay, now now the main incident's over. Here's something else for you to do. And in that case, we did like a more like CTF style like governance proposal thing, where like if this is a DAO that has like on-chain governance for smart contract upgrades or fund management, we worked with the folks at Sigma Prime to like craft a bunch of like malicious governance proposals for one of the protocols, which was fun because like it was like, hey, which of these proposals is doing what it says it's going to do, and which one of these is like kind of like accidentally introducing or on purpose introducing a vulnerability to the protocol. So these like kind of CTF style take-home exercises is an additional thing that that protocols can do, and if they have like an audit firm that they work with, that might be able to help us craft some stuff that like just helps us with the planning.
Got it. Well, this is fantastic. I feel like I've learned a ton from this conversation. And yeah, like I said, like I kind of want to just jump in here, fork this, and start making some examples. And I'm like kind of sad that I have like a bunch of shit I have to do this weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about or tell any of the devs or security researchers out there? Or protocols?
I'd say like if people like, I'm interested also in like feedback on how we can scale this thing more, because like I said, very scrappy. We like pull together who we can have to help, but perhaps like we can also have just a public repo where people can say, hey, I'm going to spend these few days like thinking about how I would attack this protocol in a war game. If like people just even want to like build up libraries of that stuff, then like hey, I would love to see how like this DEX responds in this scenario. Like we can kind of crowdsource some of those scenario ideas and then run them together. So if people have ideas for like how to take a process like this, which is like just starting to grow, and figure out how to make it more and more accessible, like would love help on learning that.
Cool. So everyone go to the repo, start contributing,
file
some
issues,
ideas,
ping
file
me,
issues.
Twitter, Telegram, same name on Twitter and Telegram. So just message me.
Excellent. Well, Isaac, thank you so much for being here. This is fantastic. Thank you for putting together this war rooms, war games for Web3 with the SEAL team, with the SEAL Alliance. Like I said, I'm really excited to kind of play with this more, see where this grows, see where this evolves. This is something we really, really need in the Web3 ecosystem. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, all.